Welcome to Living Life in the End for the Successful and Fulfilled Woman. I am your host, Dr. Stephanie D. Barnes, the Liberated Lawyer. I help women to get everything they desire in life by equipping them with powerful strategies to achieve the fulfillment they desire and deserve. Who said you can't have it all? Clearly, they did not know about living life in the end. When women make powerful decisions and create great strategies, they can have everything they desire in life. Girlfriend, forget about choosing between being successful or fulfilled. You can be successful and fulfilled. It's time. It's time for you to get everything you desire and deserve. It's time for you to live your life on purpose. It's time for you to live a life that is fulfilled, meaningful, and full of joy. It's time for you to walk boldly in the power of your decisions. If you're going to be in this world, you need to be fulfilled in this life. Life is too long to be unfulfilled. Join me for another episode of Living Life in the End, where you learn how to live fulfilled, fit, and free. Hey, it's time for Musing from the Mind of Dr. SDB, where I share provocative thoughts to help you live your life in the end. Girl, I've got something on my mind. Well, March is Women's History Month, and this is a time where we set aside opportunities to celebrate women who have contributed to the greatness of this world. And I thought that this episode would be a great opportunity to talk about how we can all be a part of her story. Now, for those of you who've maybe followed me for a long time, you may know that I have been a voice on women's leadership for quite some time. When I started my career as a speaker, I focused primarily on leadership topics that help to build women up. And I got my start with living life in the end years ago when I decided that there needed to be more women at the table with me. I was an executive for a health system and could not help but notice that outside of nursing, there were no women leaders. And literally, when I sat at the table in the boardroom, there was just me. And I knew that there were more qualified women that could be leaders throughout that particular organization. So I committed to starting a leadership development program so that I could not only show the other male senior leaders that there were talented women who were capable of leading projects and being promoted, but also, and most importantly, to help women to develop leadership identities for themselves. And I'll tell you, I remember just as clear as it was some years ago when I was sitting in my office talking to one of my team members, one of the risk managers for the organization. Her name is Kim Henderson. She was an excellent risk manager. I thought very highly of her, and she had worked at the health system, I think, at that point, maybe about 20 years. And I can't recall if it was a formal performance review or just an opportunity where we were talking about her performance, but I remember looking her in her face and telling her, what a great leader she was. And I remember the look on her face when she heard me say those words to her, and she replied, "No one has ever seen me as a leader." And I was amazed because I'm like, how could they not? She was a great leader. She had the ability to influence others. She had the ability to execute strategy. She had the ability to make change. And when we had that exchange, I realized that there were other women who were leaders, but had never been recognized as such, and that needed to change. And I did my research because I happened to be on my own leadership journey because at one point I decided I needed to be a CEO because that was the only way that I was going to have the power and influence that I needed in my life. I needed to have the title CEO. And I had begun reading leadership books and reading about other great CEOs and really on my leadership journey. And of course, quickly realized that I didn't need a title to be a leader. I needed to learn how to inspire and influence other people and to be able to take a vision to a plan, to a strategy, into execution. We lead every day and many times have no formal position of authority or title associated with that. But I happened to be on this journey for myself, and I decided to compile all that I had learned for myself and to create a leadership development program. And I called it, I think it was Finding and Developing the Leader in You. And I literally pulled together a 12-week curriculum from, I don't know, maybe 20 books I had read and things I had learned, and I organized them in a sequence that made sense and thought about what I needed to be a better leader and how I could help other women to be better leaders. And I went to my CEO and I told him about my plan and asked him to support me in developing other women leaders because I don't know, at some point prior to me asking him about this, at a senior leadership team meeting, we were discussing promotions and emerging talent throughout the organization. And when they made recommendations for project assignments, they were all males. They were all white males, as a matter of fact. And I was the only Black person in the room, only person of color, and a woman, and the only I think probably the only Black woman in that the only woman in that particular meeting, because it was a smaller group, it wasn't a full leadership group. And I remember saying, "Well, aren't there women that can be assigned to these positions?" And literally the response was no, that there's nobody else that's qualified. And I was like, well, how is that so? At the time, the company had, I think it was called some type of management program that was supposed to produce potential leaders. And I said, well, aren't there women who go through this graduate management program, whatever it was called? And they said yes. And well, how are they not qualified? But the men that have gone through these programs, it just so happened that all of the men that they were assigning to the projects had gone through that program. I was like, well, how are the men qualified? And yet the women who've gone through there are not. And of course, they didn't have an answer. And so when I went to my CEO to request, I said, well, let me develop this program, and it's distinct from the management program because the management program focused on technical things. And One of the things that's really important to understand is you can be really great at your profession, but be a horrible leader because technical skills do not always equate to leadership skills because technical skills deal with the subject matter. You can be a subject matter expert, but not be able to relate to other people and not be able to lead them. You can manage them and tell them what to do and tell them how to do, but leading is totally different from that. So, the program that I developed really focused on the person and helping them to build their influence, the ability to build strategies and plans and to execute a vision and to take something from vision to execution. And I called it Finding and Developing the Leader in You because I really wanted the women who went through that program to recognize that they had been leaders all along, just like Dorothy. Anyway, lest I digress. So, fortunately, my CEO supported me, and I was able to produce 5 classes, I think, over a 2-year period. I forget how long, but anyway, it was about 5 classes. And so about 100 women went through that program, and many of them went on to become leaders in the organization, and some, found leadership positions outside of the organization. And so I tell that story to share with you that there's always room at the table. And when anytime you are a history maker, and I'm speaking directly to women who are herstory makers, anytime you're in a position to create something new, you are also in a position to bring others along. And I think that we should be committed to bringing others along because it takes nothing away from us. And certainly by developing that program, I actually had the woman who ended up being my successor when I left that position. She went through the program. So I was cultivating and grooming someone to replace me because at that time I knew I didn't want to stay there. I knew that I wanted to do something different. I definitely didn't want to stay in that position. And I lost nothing. In fact, I gained so much more. I gained the ability to impact the lives of other women. I literally can look back and say that there are 100 women who experienced something transformational because I was committed to being able to bring that program to life. And that's a beautiful thing. And I also was able to launch the path that I'm on now. I every time I teach, one thing I love about coaching and speaking and teaching is it reinforces whatever I am teaching, it reinforces that in me. And I get hype. I love cultivating other women. And in fact, I believe that my personal mission in life is to inspire excellence in others. When I distill how I show up in different spaces, that's my superpower. I can inspire you and not just blow your head up and with encouragement and flattery, but cultivate and help you to develop a way to bring your ideas to fruition. I can equip. I've been blessed to do that through my training, through my experience, and my commitment to equip other women to make powerful decisions that lead to powerful outcomes. And so, what I want to talk about in this episode is just the importance to embrace each other as women so that we can all find our place in history. And the thing that is important to remember is that helping another woman to find her place in history does not block you from getting to yours. Because, in fact, no two women can be in the same place. They can't fill the same spot. It's your spot is reserved for you her spot is reserved for her. And if you help her to get to her space, inevitably it helps you to get to yours or to get to an even higher space. So, I wanted to share 3 things with you to equip us all to be a part of the history that brings other women along. And the first thing that I want to share is we need to be more queens and fewer queen bees. So let me break that down for you. So my dissertation was it was aptly called Murphy Brown and Queen Bees and Claire Huxtable, Murphy Brown, Queen Bees, and the development of leadership identity in young girls. And in the course of studying or developing research around leadership identity and leadership identity is how we develop our expression, recognition, and manifestation, if you will, of the leadership capabilities and how we identify as leaders and with other leaders or with leaders. And in the course of developing or doing the research for my dissertation, I ran across articles and research that talked about queen bees. And, I kind of always thought a queen bee was a good thing. I, likened it to the queen bee of honeys, like honeybees, the queen bee is running things. She's the life of the hive, she is a very central part to that ecosystem. And I learned, however, that queen bees in this context are not so good. And to put it shortly, queen bees are women who get to a place of leadership, position, and authority, or, they get to an elevated place in an organization or in a community, and they actively work against other women. Now, this is not just mere, I got it and you got to get it for yourself, and I'm not going to help. It's some of that too, but it's really actively working against other women in a almost combative posture, where instead of helping other women and forming alliances with other women, queen bees actively look to shut other women out. If another woman comes up to the table, she literally snatches the chair from under her. And we need to have less or fewer queen bees and more queens. And what I mean by this is I like to think of a queen or think about a queen from the perspective of being a sovereign. And if you think about the queens in history, they are the head of their states. They do rule their queendoms. They do rule their empires for empresses, but they also build alliances. And it's important to recognize that any person in power needs alliances. And definitely you can get ahead and you can be successful being a bully and being mean to other people and being manipulative and overly ambitious to the point of it being a detriment and not a positive attribute. But those who are really successful, they build alliances. And so, as we're thinking about Women's History Month and thinking about the women who have been great leaders and who are great leaders, most of them are successful because of their alliances. So, if we want to truly create herstory and truly be a part of the story that tells about building up other women, we need to be queens and not queen bees. And that leads me to the second point is the importance of celebrating great women leaders. Now, many of you may know I did a TEDx talk back in 2016, and I focused on how women, or I advocated for gender neutral descriptions of leadership. Because over time, leadership attributes have been categorized as either masculine or feminine. And this tends to suggest that if a woman happens to exhibit an attribute that's in the masculine category, that somehow she is acting like a man or is penalized because she's not using her feminine attributes of leadership. And so in that TEDx talk, and you can go look it up, I'll actually put a link in the show notes. But in that TEDx talk, I advocated for abandoning this categorization along feminine and masculine, literally using those terms, and instead using gender neutral terms that don't penalize men or women for exhibiting effective leadership. And just to give you an example, being collaborative is considered a feminine leadership attribute. Being assertive is considered a masculine leadership attribute. Well, men need to collaborate and women need to be assertive. It's not something that should be left to one gender or the other. And so, anyway, in that advocacy, the point is to recognize that women shouldn't be relegated to a certain type of leader or left out of the leadership equation altogether. And we need to learn to embrace strong women leaders. Being a strong woman leader does not mean that you're leading like a man or you're masculine or anything negative. You are exhibiting great leadership characteristics that help you to be effective. And so, you know, we need to embrace leadership across the spectrum. And just to kind of give you other examples, like feminine attributes or feminine leadership attributes include cooperation, empathy, concern for others, interpersonal engagement, being participatory. And those things lead to mentoring and collaboration. Attributes that are associated with masculine leadership are like task orientedness, competitiveness, rationality, decision making, assertiveness, and self confidence. And so the terms that I advocate, even though they're not as sexy, are communal and agentic. Communal is encompasses those leadership attributes which traditionally have been called feminine attributes, and agentic encompasses those that have traditionally been referred to as masculine. And it's really important for us to shift the way we think about leadership and stop thinking about putting men or women in a box and really think about achievement and relationship building skills. I like that a whole lot better than communal and agentic. Those two terms to me, they're scientific and they sound a little cold, but in everyday terms, their achievement attributes that help you to achieve and do the thing, then their relationship building skills that help you to relate to other people, to build those alliances, to influence others so that you can do the thing. And so it's just really important for us to break down these barriers that denigrate women for being assertive or ambitious or decisive. Those are great leadership attributes. And you don't want a wishy-washy leader, male or female. So it's important for us to destigmatize the words, destigmatize great leadership, and embrace women leaders in particular across all the spectrums, because there are women who never raise their voice and may otherwise seem relaxed, laid back, that are just as effective as the woman who has a very assertive voice and is not afraid to raise it. And the thing is, neither of those women is a bad leader. Each is leading in their own style. And it's important for women to be able to lead the way that's comfortable for them and that's effective. And that leads me to the last point, and that is really respecting the diversity of womanhood. And the thing is, I believe leadership comes in all forms. And the most elevated leader in society is the mother. Mothers lead. They lead their households, they lead their children, they lead in the schools. You know, when they go to advocate for their children and the different communities, like the different organizations that their children belong to, mothers are leaders and housewives are leaders. CEOs are leaders. You know, being a leader is not a one size fits all phenomenon. We lead from where we are. Being a leader, it looks like any woman who has the ability to influence others to move. That's what leadership is. And it's so important for us to not look down upon women who don't work outside the home, who are housewives, and to not necessarily think that the only way you can be a leader is to be the CEO of a company or to have your own business. Each of those women is a leader. We get to carve our own path. And I think it's so important to recognize that rather than comparing our experiences to others, we should focus on how our experiences complement each other. I embrace the concept of collaborative competition. This is where women don't compete against each other, but compete against ourselves and expand the capacity of women collectively. You know, being a woman comes with so many choices and paths, and each of us is extraordinary in our own way. And it's important that we support each other and believe in ourselves enough to know that what is for us, and no one can take that away. Ultimately, if we are going to find our place in her story, we have to embrace life, leadership, love, even with an abundance mentality. Because a scarcity mentality comes from the perspective of there's not enough, I got to hoard it, I got to keep it to myself. If I help you, I'm not going to succeed. An abundance mentality recognizes that the more I add value to you, the more valuable I become, and the more value I am able to get for myself. Because here's the truth: when we build one another up, we build ourselves up. So, as we celebrate women's history in this particular month, and as we wake up every day and create our own history, we are not going to be successful and fulfilled if we are comparing our journeys to others and hoarding resources rather than collaborating, building alliances so that we have people, women in particular, who can help us to achieve our goals. You've heard me say this many times that whether you're the CEO of, whether you report to a CEO or you are a CEO of your own business, you're always a CEO of your own life. And every CEO has a team. They do. They have a team. They create alliances, and that's how they are able to be successful. And certainly, if you want to be successful and fulfill, It is important for you to have alliances so that you are able to have someone you can talk to, have someone you can learn from, have someone that can pour into you, and someone that you can pour into them. We are much better off when we work together to create a history that has a place for each of us. Well, that's all I have to say about that. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for another Musing from the Mind of Dr. SDB, where I share provocative thoughts that help you live your life in the end. I hope you learned something. I hope you felt something. But most of all, girl, I hope you do something. Fulfillment won't happen because you desire it. It will happen because you decide to go get it. Let's get it. This episode was brought to you by the Successful and Fulfilled Woman New You Transformation, a VIP day for the high achieving woman who is ready to be successful and fulfilled. If you are a woman who feels burned out and uninspired, or you are a woman ready to start over after a divorce, death, or other disruption, or you are a mother whose children are ready to leave the nest or are already gone, and you are now ready to create a meaningful life for yourself, or you are a woman who's approaching your golden years and you want the next half to be the best half, or you are a woman who's ready to get more out of life and ready to stop marking time and start living life, then we need to have a revelation conversation. Go to www.everythingideserve.com to schedule your complimentary revelation conversation, where together we will talk about where you are now and where you want to be, and begin to develop a plan to get you where you desire to be. You will leave your revelation conversation understanding the first thing that you can start doing today to begin living a successful and fulfilled life. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Living Life in the End for the Successful and Fulfilled Woman. Please be sure to let me know what made you feel something, what you learned, and what moved you to action. Please subscribe so you don't miss out on a great conversation. And don't forget to rate and review the podcast and let me know how you are living life in the end. Life is too long to be unfulfilled. Don't keep all this goodness to yourself. Tell someone else to listen for themselves. We should all be fulfilled. Remember, your life is the product of your choices. Choose to commit to bringing the desires of your heart to completion. You don't get what you deserve until you get what you decide. Life is too long to be unfulfilled.